Hello and welcome back to Alejandro HD, and today we're on part 3 of the Life in the UK series. Today we're exploring the chapter Early Britain. I've wanted to try and do this as less boring as I can, or not as boring as I can, because there's a lot to cover, and um, the test, when it comes to the test, it's more remembering dates and remember key significant issues. So I'm not going to start going on rants about specific things that happened in specific times because we will be here forever. So I'll just go over what you need to know. So the first thing we want to look at is the Stone Age. So the Stone Age, of course, is the very early days, 10,000 years ago. Britain, the people who lived in Britain at the time were hunter-gatherer tribes, sort of very early humans. So you need to remember the land bridge because it was connected via the continent. So Britain at one time actually was connected to France and the mainland Europe via a land bridge before before evolution and stuff take over and years go by and things rode away. But yeah, originally we were part of the rest of Europe, which probably would have made it quite convenient, just walking over to Britain. They think around 6,000 years ago the farmers came from Eastern Europe, Southeast Europe, bringing in more sort of advanced for the time farming techniques, growing wheat, barley, things like that. They built houses, tombs, and monuments at the time. So before, when it was just hunter gatherers, it would have been a very Neolithic lifestyle, just moving with herds, that sort of thing. But then the farmers sort of brought more stability to that. And then the Bronze Age sort of came 4,000 years ago, which became, like things like plates and bowls and eating utensils, things made out of bronze essentially. And then the Iron Age brought even more sophistication, especially with weapons, spears, tools, building equipment, and things like that. So generally, the Stone Age, you just need to remember that 10,000 years ago there was a land bridge that connected Britain to the rest of the world, or the rest of Europe. The farmers arrived 6,000 years ago from Southeast Europe. They built the houses, tombs, monuments, things like Stonehenge that might pop up. Bronze Age came after, and then the Iron Age. So yeah, just I'm trying not to go into too much detail because I know I could do and would be here forever. So the next comes the Romans. So the Romans came from Italy, of course. Julius Caesar tried to invade in 55 BC, was unsuccessful. The Emperor Claudius invaded in AD 44, and it was successful. So it's good to point out that Julius Caesar never managed to actually invade Britain properly. There's not too much written history as to why that is. I think there's like a lot going on in the Roman Empire at that time, so they probably had to disparage forces elsewhere and so on. But Claudius did manage to do it. There was resistance from British tribes, and the most famous queen at the time who had an uprising was Boadicea. Boadicea is very famous, and there is actually a statue of her at Westminster. It still stands today as a tribute to her. I think I'm pronouncing her name right. And she sort of fought off the Romans, which was quite a feat at the time, considering how big the Roman Empire was and how sophisticated they were compared to Britain. Scotland was never conquered by the Romans. The Emperor Hadrian of Rome built Hadrian's Wall to keep out the Picts, which were the ancestors of modern Scottish people. So not a lot is known about the Picts. They are known to be, well, they're believed to be they're known to be ancestors of modern Scottish people. That's what's definitely known. Not a lot of writing about them. We don't know kind of what society they had. It would have probably been similar to hunter-gatherer style, but because they were further north, there would have been less chances for development up there. The Romans did occupy Britain for 400 years, and they did advance the country quite massively, building roads, systems for like heating water, things like that. There was a lot of improvements that the Romans made, and they did leave in 410 AD to fight on other conflicts in Europe. So next came the Anglo-Saxons. So they left in 410 AD, and then Britain was again invaded, this time by northern tribes known as the Angles and the Saxons. So when they arrived in Britain, they established their own kingdoms, and they created sort of their own lifestyle, and sort of merged together as the two tribes, like Anglo and Saxons. Scotland did remain free of Anglo-Saxon rule. There was periods of time where there was parts of Scotland at the time wasn't called Scotland; it would have been called Caledonia, the name that the Romans gave the Scotland. There would have been sort of small skirmishes with lowland Scottish tribes and so on, but it was more focused around the southern parts of England. And then this is when Christianity came into it. So Christianity came from missionaries from different parts of Europe. I think it would have been from like Italy and countries like France at the time, like places like that. They came over to preach, and of course the two famous preachers of the time was Saint Patrick of Ireland and Saint Columba, who established a monastery in Iona in Scotland. Very famous. Then the Vikings came. So, yep, in AD 789, the Vikings came to raid coastal towns, take slaves, just generally be a nuisance. They did develop their own communities in the east of England and of Scotland. So in that time, I did actually realise that I've spelt United wrong there. So whoops. At that time, the Anglo-Saxons, sort of came under one banner, united under one guy, Alfred the Great, who was the first major king of the Anglo-Saxons. This was to quell the Vikings, which seemed like a good thing to do at the time. And of course, Scotland done the same thing. That was under Kenneth MacAlpine. So I think there was a lot of clans and a lot of tribes, and they all just got together and they named him King of Scotland. And then that's when Scotland actually became the common name of the country. Before that, like I say, Caledonia was the name because that was the Roman who gave us the name. Things to note here, obviously, the dates. Always notice the dates. Alfred the Great, you need to remember him, and Kenneth MacAlpine of Scotland, because those were the two first of both nations. So they might ask a question like, who was the first Anglo-Saxon king of the Anglo-Saxon era in England? Well, it was King Alfred the Great, and likewise for Scotland. So good to know that. The Norman Conquest. So the Norman Conquest was quite a major part of history. So we're going to have to talk a lot about this because I've seen this come up a lot in the tests. So 1066, Battle of Hastings, invasion led by William the Duke of Normandy. Normandy being now what France is, northern France. He defeated King Harold, the Saxon king, at the Battle of Hastings, and he was crowned the first king of England, like the full king of England, and he was titled William the Conqueror. The battle was commemorated by the piece of embroidery known as the Bayeux tapestry. My French isn't very good. And this actually is a great, big, massive tapestry, which is still around today, and it's in France, and it shows the Battle of Hastings. So, yeah, that's what happened. He came in, and he sort of unified England under one kingdom. And when he brought that in, he brought the Norman French, which became the language of the ruling classes. It's important to note that Scotland was never fully taken over by the Normans. There was some territory in the lowland part of Scotland where, there was fought against and stuff, but there was never any. They never held Scotland. They just held some parts of lowland Scotland. And in Wales, they did take over Wales, but in time, the Welsh sort of started fighting back and getting some of their own sort of territory back. And in response to that, the Norman kingdom put lords there as sort of not puppets, but kind of like noblemen to sort of govern over the Welsh, just to make it a bit more sustainable. Because I think fighting at that time would have cost a lot of money, and with it being a new kingdom, they needed the money for other things. Continuing on with the Norman invasion, William sent people all over England to draw up lists of towns and all the villages. This was called the Doomsday Book. The Doomsday Book's very important. The Doomsday Book it was like an inventory of all the things that England had at the time. Towns, villages, what animals people owned, what people ate, and that still exists today as well. And the reason why he done this is said, because we don't really know, but the reason why he done this is so he could keep an eye on exactly what was going on in the kingdom, and so he could learn about the actual culture in England, which was quite interesting. So the Doomsday Book will definitely be a part of the test, so you need to remember that. So I'll just quickly go back over all the stuff again. So things that you need to remember. Farmers arrived. No, sorry. The hunter-gatherers was around 10,000 years ago. There was a land bridge that connected Britain to the rest of the Europe. Farmers arrived 6,000 years ago, probably from southeast Europe. And it's not confirmed, but they're most likely from there, just due to the archaeologists and what they found. The farmers were a bit more sophisticated. Then the Bronze Age happened 4,000 years later, and then the Iron Age. So the Iron Age sort of brought in completely new generation of things like tools, spears, weapons, and plates, bowls, things to eat from, things like that. Just more sophistication, like statues and so on. Then the Romans. Claudius invaded and was successful in AD 44. The British tribe's most famous queen was Boadicea. That will be there. That will be on the test. Scotland was never conquered by the Romans. Hadrian's Wall was built by the Emperor Hadrian to keep the Picts out. The Romans occupied Britain for 400 years before, and also advanced the country before leaving in 410 AD to fight other wars. The Anglo-Saxons came in after that. The tribes were called Angles and Saxons. They established the kingdoms in Britain. Scotland remained free of Anglo-Saxon rule. They were converted to Christianity from missionaries, and the most famous preachers of that time being St. Patrick of Ireland and St. Columba of Scotland. St. Columba established the Iona monastery, where a lot of the Scottish kings are buried. But I don't think we need to know that, but that's a little tidbit for you guys. The Vikings came next. They came from Denmark and Norway, and they came around AD 789 to raid coastal towns. They developed their own communities in the east of England and Scotland. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms then united under Alfred the Great, who defeated the Vikings, and in Scotland, people united under the first Scottish king, Kenneth MacAlpine, and then that's when Scotland began to be called Scotland. And then the Normans really need to know the 1066 Battle of Hastings, important. William the Duke of Normandy was the conqueror there. The belligerent was Harold the Saxon king, defeated. The battle is commemorated in the piece of embroidered tapestry known as the Bayeux Tapestry, very important. Norman French became the language of the ruling class, you need to remember that. And again, as we see, Normans did take some territory in Scotland, but never fully invaded. And the Welsh did get invaded, but then won it back for time. The Doomsday Book, very important. You need to remember that, and why it was important for William to essentially have this list of all the things that were in England. So that's all you really need to know for that part of the test. I hope that was educational. You won't get to ask, because the test only exists of 24 questions, so you're not going to get asked a lot about these specific things, but you will probably get asked one or two questions, or maybe three. What I've found in the mock tests is Boadicea comes up quite a lot. The Battle of Hastings comes up quite a lot. Stone Age does sometimes too, especially with the 10,000 years, the 4,000 years, 6,000 years, and you just need to make sure you get those in order. So, I hope you enjoyed my video on early Britain, and I'll see you in the next video for the next chapter of the book. Cheers.